Oh dear, what have I done there? That's great. So I've done the wrong one on the when I first started the stream. I've put it on the wrong one. Thank you for joining us at the first event on Discuss with Devlin. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Well, Putin said he was backing his troops off, and the next day he invaded the Ukraine. Is there ulterior motives on this? Because I personally think that that Putin just wants a Ukraine back in the motherland of Russia. He said he was going in there under the pretenses that he was protecting and keeping peace. He was going to be the peacekeeper for the two states that would, in essence, like to still be with Russia but a part of the Ukraine. Are we doing enough? Is the West doing enough? America, the European countries, the UN, are we doing enough with the sanctions? Do we need to do more? I really don't know. I just know that the situation in the Ukraine at this moment in time is not good. It's not in a good place. And I just feel that maybe we're not doing enough to help these people. 385,000 people on the last time I looked were leaving the Ukraine because they were frightened of what the Russians were going to do when they got there. And do you know what really bothers me is that, if the UN as a collective went against Russia and they, for argument's sake, went with military power, I think we'd decimate Russia. We've all got our own opinions, and I'm sure you've got yours. But what really bothers me, even though China has said that what they think Russia's doing is wrong and they think they should stop, I think if it came to it, that China would side with Russia. And that's just my own personal opinion. I'm just really, really apprehensive at this moment in time about the situation. People have mentioned World War III. It's popped into my mind because, this could happen. A superpower like Russia, maybe is getting together with another superpower, which is China. And for me, there's only one other real superpower, and that is the United States. And I don't want to see this shit. I don't want to see, these people fighting, for, in essence, to be the biggest superpower, because I think that's what sometimes it all boils down to. Putin's got big feet and he's stamping them. And I think, he basically threatened the West, that he said if we'd get involved, then we would see circumstances that we have never seen before. And I'm pretty frightened of that. I don't know if maybe he's testing us, seeing if we'll do anything. But that's a thing that we're going to discuss tonight. Like I say, the first stream on Discuss with Devlin, we're going to discuss Russia invading the Ukraine. And tonight I've got one of my friends on that's been a panel member for a couple of years now, and it's Stealth Slicer, and he's been watching this very closely. Good evening, Stealth. How you doing, mate?
Hey guys, I'm doing well, thanks, Devlin. It's nice to see everyone here. Wish it could be under nicer circumstances on a nicer topic, but unfortunately this is the way things have played out.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this, Stealth? I mean, I know you've actually been following this, this situation. But what do you think he's up to? What do you think Putin's motives are for all this? Because I'm sure you've seen in the news that he said, the two, I'll call them annexes, that say that they want to be a part of Russia, and he's gone in there saying he's protecting them. What are your overall views? I mean, we'll get into the nitty gritty, but what are your overall views about this situation, mate?
Well, I think that's two separate questions. But I'll answer the first one first, which is why do we think Russia's gone into Ukraine? And I think it boils down, obviously, I can't say with any sort of accuracy. I can just sort of assess what I can find out and then draw my own conclusions. One is obviously the vocal one that Putin has always been saying, which is NATO's westward expansion. And a lot of people don't really get why this is so significant. And the reason why it's significant is because geographically, when after World War II, when NATO was created, when the Soviet Union had the Warsaw Pact, the front line was Western, Eastern Germany. And it's a lot easier to defend Western, Eastern Germany compared to Far Eastern Europe. And the reason why that is because there's something called the Great North European Plain, I believe it is. And essentially what that is a geographical feature where primarily flat land of, it's essentially open space. It's perfect warfare country, basically. And that stretches from essentially Germany all the way out into Russia. But the thing is, Germany is the thinnest point. It's the thin end of the wedge, whereas Russia is the wide end of the wedge. And obviously, it's a lot easier to defend the bottleneck than it is.
So you're thinking a lot of this is strategic?
No. I'm just saying this is one of the two reasons.
Right. Okay.
And the issue with this is right now you have essentially Russia is backed up against Belarus and Ukraine. If it remains as such, that pushes that front line westward.
Right.
Which keeps them at bay somewhat. But if Ukraine was to stop being neutral and join NATO, which they've been attempting to do, that makes Belarus a salient, and that is an incredibly hard thing to defend. It also puts NATO on Russia's border, and it also pushes Russia's line of defense essentially all the way back to their borders, and that's something Putin's been saying for a long, long time. So that's
because he has, and I've seen him say that, and he's reiterated. I think that's why he's so staunch. He's saying, no, hang on. This is the situation. The West are not listening, and I understand because I remember seeing something that you just mentioned there, Stelf, that you've got to look at it. I mean, if we're going to have this conversation, we're going to have this discussion in a proper manner, then we've got to look at both sides of the story. And yes, I can see that Putin is getting pissed off is probably the best word I can say it with, because the UN, that sometimes can be a bully, by the way, is pushing him into his, and I will say it, even though you said no, strategic territory.
Well, I didn't necessarily say no. I just said that is one of the 2 points. The second one is I want to remain very neutral. I want to remain very open-minded because I have no idea what's going on inside the Kremlin. But the other one is economic related. And just to start with, we all know that Russia is a petrostate. It sells a lot of natural gas. It sells a lot of oil. That makes up, sales of that essentially make up roughly half of the actual Russian government budget. And also, I think about a third of the actual Russian GDP, which, by the way, the entirety of Russia, its economy, is only slightly stronger than Spain's. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, who is the number one buyer of all this Russian oil and gas? Europe. And in order to do that, you need pipelines. So you lay pipelines from Russia to Europe. As part of that, you go
Germany,
through
in effect.
Exactly. As part of that, you go through Ukraine. And Ukraine is having Russia pay a tax to move that gas through. It's paying tariffs. It's just
and why shouldn't you, though, at the end of the day? But, I mean, looking at both sides of the story, you should. I mean, if you... Or some sort of deal where you come through my country, you're going to pay a tariff, or we get... some sort of percentage of whatever you sell to, the whole of Europe. Because apparently, I believe that Germany take 40% of gas from Russia.
Yes.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe it's something massive like 40%.
Yes, and you're getting towards a point, the end point that I'm trying to make, which is in 2012, Ukraine was under control of a very pro-Russian government. I'm not going to say they're a proper government because they were.
But they were. I'll say it. They were. They were.
I do not know enough about Ukrainian politics around 2012 to actually say that is what I'm saying. They were pro-Russia. I don't know if they were puppet governments.
They were brutal, by the way. We were just having a conversation about this before we came live.
But essentially, 2012, Ukraine had some very interesting developments there in the field of petrochemicals, which is that deposits of shale gas were found in Ukraine, and a lot of that was found in the Donbass region and in Crimea. In 2014, Ukraine had its revolution, and the current government, which was Moscow leaning, was replaced by a Western leaning government, should you say.
Yeah.
And that started alarm bells ringing because
which suited the UN, which obviously pissed off Putin.
Because Ukraine, pretty much overnight in the span of 2 years, had gone from being a country which had no petrochemical industry to the 14th largest petrochemical reserve in the world.
Shit.
It overnight had all these resources basically found, but it didn't have the economy, it didn't have the technology to exploit these. But that was then, Western companies starting getting involved.
Fuck. Stealth, can I just pop to the chat there? Just want to say good evening to Slavic, Techno, King Speedy, I believe that's Josh. How you doing, mate? And Silver. If anyone's watching the stream tonight, we had 1 or 2 technical issues about getting on Discuss with Devlin. So if you're watching this on the Restless Natives channel, which is a gaming channel, obviously, I had to do this to get me set up on Discuss with Devlin. So if you could pop over to Discuss with Devlin so we could get some sort of traffic over there. Steg, how you doing, mate? But yeah, we'll carry on with this. So
go on. In that period, Ukraine ended up finding out that it has significant petrochemical reserves, which were then supposedly they started working with Western companies to see about extracting these. But because of that means that suddenly Russia's monopoly, essentially, on petrochemical sales to Europe would be threatened. And then what happened in 2014, once that entire shift happened, Russia took Crimea and cut off 80% of Ukraine's offshore petrochemical reserves. It then also started getting involved in the Donetsk region with Donetsk and Luhansk, which is where the other significant reserve is. I'm not saying that is the reasons. I'm not saying that that's wholly accurate because I don't know. I'm just saying that this is potentially factors as to what...
And it contributes.
Going through his head. Yes, because, as I say, I don't know the whole accuracy of this stuff. I just know that something along these lines has essentially been happening. And if I was working as someone in Moscow, and then suddenly we have another new player coming in who is essentially threatening to, wipe out half of our government budget, a third of our economic income.
Sure.
That is a major concern for any state,
Definitely.
Be it Russia, be it could be completely fictional states. If someone shows up and says, I'm going to get rid of a third of your economy, that's alarm bells.
It's not going to be a good situation.
Exactly, yes. But this could potentially have been a reason as to why Russia was so firmly for annexing Crimea and now also going after Donetsk and Luhansk and recognizing them as independent republics, because it does cut Ukraine's access to these strategic deposits.
So, okay, on that, where Putin and Russia recognize the two states, why then is he moving? See, I think Putin just wants to take the Ukraine back into the motherland of Russia. Why then, if he said he's just protecting those two states, why is he then firing on main cities and places in the Ukraine? For me, Stealth, he just wants to take that. He wants that country back. He wants what happened in 2014 totally reversed.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I could understand when Putin put out his decree that he was going to recognize Donetsk and Luhansk.
Yeah, I
was saying, okay, I can kind of understand why Putin is doing this because it's been ongoing for 8 years now, something like that.
Yeah.
I could understand that. I can certainly see how I would say it's not justifiable. Putin should not be involved there, yada yada yada, because I do believe that Putin should not be essentially annexing those territories in his decree. But then, of course, the day after,
he invaded.
So that happened, and it's like, okay. But yeah, I think you're right, essentially, with saying that he wants a buffer state, because he's been telling us this for forever and a day. He does not want Ukraine in NATO because that pushes NATO's border.
He's made that
border.
perfectly clear.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think this is probably a case of what you are being told is the truth, which is I do not want NATO on my borders. That might not be the whole truth, but it's an understandable
I think most actually you probably have a point there still that I said he just wants Ukraine back in the motherland. I think it's probably more so what you say is that he doesn't want the UN on his borders rather than him bringing back the Ukraine to Russia. I think you're probably right that he wants rather than that have the Ukraine back. He doesn't want the UN at his borders or close, and he's watching this and he's seen this because regardless what you think or say about Putin, he's not fucking stupid.
No, he's definitely not stupid. He's proved in the past that he can be a very shrewd and very capable politician. Yeah. But I think the thing that complicates this so much is the history of Russia, essentially, because back during the Russian Empire, pre-Soviet Union and such, Ukraine, Belarus, they were all one country. They were just Russia.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
the USSR.
No, pre that Russian Empire.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, USSR came about. Yeah. They were all essentially one country still. The actual cultural and social history of Far Eastern Europe is incredibly complex because it goes back as far as like the Kievan Rus, and I think that was like the 1100s or something like that.
Right, I'm not going back that far.
Long time, which is where Putin has come up with his justification of I'm invading Ukraine to protect ethnic Russians and such like that, because he's not wholly wrong in saying that, because
many other countries would do that.
Well, not necessarily, but because it's like the Ukrainians and the Russians, they've used this terminology in the past. They are brothers. They're not necessarily the same people, but it's you know, a man from the north of England and the man from the south of England, they are
same
very,
people,
very closely intertwined. Yeah.
But fight. Definitely.
It's an incredibly intertwined and complex social and cultural dynamic that exists between Ukraine and other Baltic states and Russia, because if you go back far enough, the concept of them doesn't exist. They are just Russians, basically.
Yeah.
And that's sort of one of the angles that Putin's coming at this from, which is that, I'm doing this to protect Russians, and I'm doing this to protect, quote unquote, my people, if you will, because there are a significant number of Russians that live in Ukraine, and there is very little divide between what makes a Ukrainian and what makes a Russian, if you look at it hard enough.
Yeah. But the thing is then, okay, so all we're seeing on the news and all we're seeing on social media is that Putin's wrong, and I actually believe he's wrong. I'm going to say that I do believe he's wrong, the way he's done it. And people are complaining about the sanctions, and the West is not doing enough. So what do we do then as Western people? What do we actually do to discourage Putin? Because I think it's going to be very hard to dissuade someone like Putin. He's got his agenda, and his agenda is, which I totally agree with you now, that he doesn't want the UN too close to his borders. Be it strategic, be it he wants to look after the Russian people. What more can we do? People are shouting out on social media that the sanctions are not enough. Stealth, what do we do, mate?
Well, one thing to clarify first: it's not the UN; it's NATO. They are very separate entities. Just because I noticed we've said that a few times. He doesn't want NATO on his borders. But as for what we can do, we're doing what we can do. Essentially, we need to, or I should say, we could continue to review these sanctions, and we could continue to explore non-militaristic options with regards to actually putting hurt on the Russian economy and putting hurt upon Russian oligarchs and Russian politicians, and see how that will influence the outcome of this.
But then they knew that was going to happen, and the majority
Russia has built a war chest.
had pulled the fucking money out anyway. All the Russian banks that we put sanctions on, apparently they only got it's a lot for the people like me and you, but they only got a few million. Because they got rid of all the money before the sanction happened.
To put that in perspective, the Russian ruble is now worth less than Robux, which is something. But yeah, this is the thing. A lot of people are saying we need to do more, we need to do more, we need to do more. But you need to also remember that we're dealing with Putin here, and we're dealing with, as you say, a military superpower. We can't. I've seen some people demanding that we put boots on the ground in Ukraine, which is absolute insanity. We should not.
Think the same.
I find it absolutely horrific what's happening in Ukraine, but NATO cannot put boots on the ground in Ukraine for two reasons. One, Ukraine is not a member nation of NATO.
Have they not got a special privilege, though?
No,
is it something just
something
before?
Else. I'll get into that.
Cesar, how you doing?
Ukraine is not part of NATO. Therefore, NATO has no business deploying its ground forces in Ukraine. It is absolutely...
obligation.
Exactly. It is absolutely out of the question for NATO to go across the border with their own forces. Second, is that a boots-on-the-ground intervention from NATO could, should, and will provoke a Russian response. And I say could and should because if you're looking at this from Putin's response, NATO goes across, that's essentially a declaration of war on Russia because NATO has no reason, no cause to go across. It has cause to offer support, but it has no cause to actually cross the border with.
And we take the onus off Putin then, because he'll say, "No, you invaded, not his land, but you attacked me."
Basically, you illegally placed your troops into a non-NATO country and then attacked me. That is how it would go. That would then rapidly escalate because people need to realize that the Russian force, which is attacking Ukraine, that's not the whole Russian army. That is a subset of the Russian army. Russia has a lot bigger of military, a lot more military
that we probably don't even know about, to be honest.
Well, that, but also, the forces that Putin has dedicated to Ukraine is not the entirety of the Russian army. If NATO went across the border, it's not as simple as, kick him out of Ukraine and everything's fine. No. That would open the watersheds. That would get the entire Russian military involved. And we would see open warfare, not just in Ukraine, but across Europe and probably elsewhere as well. We would have World War III. And that is a cost that I am not willing to
No, definitely. We definitely don't want that. That is something we don't want. Okay, so at the beginning, I mentioned China. So I personally think that China would side with Russia, even though they have said, they think Russia's wrong. They think they should stop doing what they're doing. But I think that they would side with Russia if the West came over and invaded. And like you say, it would be illegal because I have to say it would be illegal. But what do you think had happened then? Is that World War III?
NATO moves into Ukraine and NATO attacks Russia. Russia declares war on NATO. That then provokes Article 5, which basically signs up the entirety of NATO, which is basically, quote unquote, the West to fight with Russia. Russia has a military alliance, or there is an implied military alliance with China. China decides that it's going to attack Taiwan in all this confusion. China takes Taiwan and then joins Russia in a military alliance against, quote unquote, the West. And then we devolve into World War III, which could well escalate into nuclear violence if we decided to push into Russia or if we decide to push into China in a significant fashion. Because let's face it, we're dealing with Putin and we're dealing with Xi Jinping. And it's been said in the past that, well, I do not trust either of them with nuclear weapons, basically. But equally...
No, because I think both of those would, even just as a show of force, anywhere that they would send some sort of nuclear weapon would be bad. But I think as a show of force, they would maybe do it on a small country, Scotland. I live there, but they would. I think. Instantly, if this sort of scenario happened, I think they would show a You know, I'm the big boy. I'm the big boy. A show of force is going to happen here, and I personally think it'd just kick off. I think, you know,
it would absolutely kick off. It would not turn. Well, I presume it would not turn nuclear immediately because that's completely nonsensical. But we're dealing with people who have made some nonsensical decisions in the past. But if we then say went into Ukraine and we pushed Russia back into the borders of the Russian Federation, what happens then? Because Russia's not going to stop fighting just because you push them back.
No.
Russia is going to counterattack, which means that we are then going to have to attack Russia, which means that we then push into Russia, which is a bad idea to start with.
Yeah, seriously shouldn't do that. You know who tried to do that and it didn't work out too well for them.
Everyone who's tried to do that and it's not worked out too often. But
it's like I hate to say it, it's like going into Afghanistan. You can go in there, but you'll never win. You'll never win.
But look, if you look at a map, Moscow is not that far from Ukraine. So where is the red line, essentially? How far does NATO go before Putin says, I am going to hit you with a nuclear strike? Because is it enough to threaten the capital? Is it enough to take the capital? Is it enough to push to the Urals? Is it enough to push to Vladivostok? Where is the red line? And that is the danger with nuclear weapons. You have no idea how far you can go before you cross that red line and the opposing side launches a nuclear weapon. And
then it would just go off. Then it would absolutely just go off.
That's game over. Good night, everyone. This is Mr. Devlin signing off, never coming back.
I'm out. I mean, out.
Yeah, out. We've disconnected from the server that is life.
Because, you know, and I think it genuinely could happen. I mean, this is a scary thing. You're talking about Russia here, and you're talking about Russia with another superpower, China, even though I did say that they're telling Russia that they think they're wrong. I think that's absolute bollocks. I think if it came to it, those two together, then it's a very, very scary situation.
Absolutely.
Go on.
If we assume that this war happened and we assume that this war did not turn nuclear, then we would essentially see Taiwan would become Chinese. We would see massive Chinese expansion in the Asian subcontinent, and then we would probably end up with the Eastern European countries ending up falling back under some sort of Iron Curtain.
Sure.
And we probably end up somewhere similar to the end of World War II. This is assuming we fight ourselves to a standstill and neither side really wins, because I don't see Russia being able to overcome Europe. I don't see Europe being dumb enough to push Russia to the point of that red line.
Yeah. I totally agree. But can I go just to something that I've been seeing a lot on? I know you don't use Twitter, but I've been seeing a lot on Twitter that I'll probably get a load of shit for this, but the amount of times I have seen if Donald Trump was still in power, he would never have invaded. What are your views on this? Because I think, and I've got to say just beforehand, I think Joe Biden is senile, deluded, and very weak.
I think that I do not know enough about American politics to say one way or the other. I'll preface this with that. Okay. But I will say that Trump was far more active in the international sphere when it came to power projection and just generally, pushing the quote-unquote Western cause. I don't think that this would have happened if Trump had another term, that's the word, in order to keep pushing his whole concept of reforming NATO. And I think that Putin would have been... It may still have happened, but to a lesser extent. I think that there will at least have been a longer pause between things happening and then the invasion kicking off, because... Let's face it, at the end of the day, Biden has done very little in terms of power projection in Europe.
Well, then speaking, little. He can't. The man can't even speak. He can't even think for himself. I mean, you watch, and I didn't mean to turn this into a Biden thing, but you look at the man. He's very scary for a guy in the UK. And, I get a lot of people when I comment on certain things that say, oh, it's nothing to do with you, you're from the UK. And I'm saying that Biden, at this moment in time, and he probably isn't, the most powerful man on this earth, and I honestly believe that he's senile. I don't think he's running America. I don't think he's the president.
This whole thing that, it's none of your business, stay out of it. I understand the point.
It affects the world. I'm sorry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's true. Like, it's your election. You can pick whichever one you want, but I get to have an opinion upon that person.
Correct.
Because they are affecting me. It's like how we get to have an opinion upon Ukraine because those sanctions are now going to affect our economies, etc., etc. And not to mention the humanitarian aspect.
Yeah.
But to go back to the original point, Biden has done a lot less in terms of unifying NATO, pushing NATO's agenda, and essentially power projecting into Europe and such. Is if you compare that to Trump, he was going around the NATO member countries and verbally berating them, saying, "You're not spending enough. You're not doing enough for defense. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not doing the other."
And it was true because if you look at NATO and because they are bullies as well. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that. He was saying, like you said, they don't spend enough, they don't do enough for America, because obviously Trump loves his country. People don't like him because, in effect, he is a fucking idiot. He says things that, you really shouldn't say as a president. But, I've got to admire him in the fact that he just wanted the right thing for the West, his own country, and not just the USA, but the West as well. And I know he's got slagged off, and I know I'll get slagged off for this, but for me, I see Trump as a dishonest, honest man, if that makes any sense.
I get what you mean, and this comes back to this whole thing of we don't get a say in who is president, but we get to have an opinion of people. It doesn't necessarily mean we're a Trump supporter or we're a Biden supporter.
Yeah, correct.
We physically can't be either of those things. We're not American. We don't have votes. We can simply have an opinion upon them. And at the end of the day, I don't think that Trump nor Biden were amazing leaders of the US. I think they both had flaws, and I think they both had positive points to them. At the end of the day, you're never going to say this candidate is right, that candidate is wrong, this one is this one is the other. Everyone is going to have positives and negatives, and it comes down to how do they stack up? What is the positives to you might not be a positive to me, and vice versa, and things like that. I mean, let's pick a universally hated point from each of them. Biden was hated for his handling of Afghanistan, but Trump was hated for upping
just
the number of
Trump.
troops in Afghanistan. It's like, which way do you want it? You can't have it both ways. It's very, very difficult. You have to be able to separate political support from personal opinion, and sadly, the vast majority of the internet, i.e. Twitter, can't do that.
So how does, getting back to Ukraine, how does this all pan out? Because today Putin said, he's willing to talk. They're going to the Belarus border, apparently, but Putin's made it perfectly clear that he will have talks and he will try and deal with this situation. However, on the understanding that the Ukraine out and out just surrender. What are your views on that?
The first round of peace talks is purely theatre. They are going to fail. The Ukrainians were originally invited to, I think it was, I can't remember where it was, but it was in Belarus, and they said no, because Belarus is essentially a hostile state. They enabled the invasion. And then they said, all right, we'll move to the border. They agreed to that. But they also said that during the time that the Ukrainian delegation is in transit there, during the talks and on their return, there is to be no airborne operations, bombardment, or missile strikes. There have been missile strikes while the Ukrainian delegation is in transit. So that's already thrown out the window.
Sure.
But I genuinely see these talks being the Ukrainians show up, the Russians make their absolutely absurd demands that they've already made. The Ukrainians say, sorry, we can't accept that. The Russians say, all right, fine. Both sides part way. Everyone goes home. And Putin turns around and said, well, I gave them the option. I had talks with them. And they said,
I'm going full on now.
To invade. It honestly feels like this is a fake attempt at having genuine talks. It feels more like Putin is trying to find yet more ways to basically
justification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's fishing for justification.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It's almost painfully obvious because everyone wants a solution.
And let me go back to saying that Putin's a very clever man.
Exactly, yes. It's honestly, we've seen this before in history where you make an absurd demand in order to make someone say no in order to use it as justification. It's not an uncommon thing to see, both in history, in the military, in business. It's tried and tested. If we come out, and I pray that this war ends quickly and with as minimal loss of life as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
But if they come out from that meeting with an agreement, I will be absolutely floored. I will be amazed by that because I just genuinely don't think
you know as well as I do, Stealth, that will never happen. That's not going to happen. It's either the Ukraine will turn around and say, yes, I'm surrendering, which is not going to happen, or the Russians just totally invade and, wait and see what the West is going to do about it. Because I think, you look at social media, and I mean, I shouldn't, but I look at social media, I look at, people talking about this situation, left, right, whatever way that you sway. And I just think there's no easy way that this is going to get resolved. I think there's going to have to be something really, really bad happens before something really, really good happens.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when this all kicked off, I was speaking to a few of my friends who are a lot less, actively investigating that. But it was like, well, what's going to happen? What's going on with it? And I actually quoted or paraphrased the movie Fury, where
Brad Pitt tanks.
It will end one day, but first a whole lot more people have got to die.
Yeah,
that's what's going to happen.
This not a good thing though.
No, not at all. But this conflict is going to continue. A lot more people will die, and then it will end.
So do you think this is going to be a long sort of situation? Do you think there's going to be like many standoffs? Do you think the West will get involved? Do you think we'll let they'll let and see how it sort of pans out, or do you think they will make some sort of decision where they say no, we're not going to have this and move in? It's very scary. And there's a lot of things going on in my head about this situation. I really don't know where it will go, and that's why I'm glad you came on tonight and there's people chatting in the chat there. How do you think this is going to pan out for you personally?
Best case scenario, Ukraine continues to resist. Ukraine shatters the illusion that Russia is an unstoppable juggernaut. Ukraine is ultimately defeated by Russia, but Russia's image is tarnished forevermore because up until the Russian invasion of Ukraine, everybody was terrified of Russia.
Actually, Cheeky said something. If you look at what Cheeky said in the chat there.
Don't like NATO being next door to Russia. A silver ever since the nation. Yeah, it's a fair point because NATO being up against Russia's border.
And we were talking about that previously, about 15 minutes ago. Yeah.
But anyway, go back to the question.
Yeah.
Russia invaded on Thursday. It is now Sunday. The Ukrainians are fighting back. The Ukrainians are still in control of their capital city.
Very much so, apparently.
They are still in control of their second city as of day 4. This is not going as quickly as many people predict.
Putin thought it would go.
The Ukrainians are fighting tooth and nail for their country.
Yeah.
And that has, in my opinion, significantly damaged this perceived aura of invincibility that the Russian military had. It was always that great looming bear that was just waiting to come across the border and would sweep everybody in front of them, but it's not happened.
No.
Granted, this isn't the full might of the Russian army, but Ukraine, a small, economically weak country, has fought back and has repelled the Russians held them at bay
4 days.
4 days.
Yeah.
That is a long time.
A very long time for
superpower.
a so-called superpower. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, exactly. And this then leads me to the conclusion that ultimately Ukraine will fall because it's going up against Russia, and it cannot have external boots on the ground. Not going to happen. But ultimately, I think that this will be quite damaging for Russia because there are protests across many, many Russian cities. There are thousands of people who've been arrested for participating in those protests. The aura of invincibility around the Russian military is going to be severely impacted because we're seeing Twitter feeds of burning Russian tanks.
Yeah, correct.
Sadly killed infantrymen on both sides. We're
people
seeing
protesting in Russia itself.
Yeah,
they're not bothering. The gulag means fuck all at the moment. If the people uprise, if it gets big enough, the people uprise, then that's where I think, because it's happened in Russia before. If the people uprise, Putin needs to fucking behave himself. And at a point, I'm sorry, Stealth, to just put in, at a point, a few years ago, I actually admired Putin. I thought he's a strong man. He's got good values, but you know what? That's gone for me at the moment.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I'm saying. Like, the illusion of Russia and what Russia was built up to be over the past 20, 30 years since Putin came to power has been heavily impacted by this war. And of course, these sanctions are going to be massively impactful on the Russian economy. And what causes the death of empires? The death of their economy. Like, this is crazy. This is... The result of this war is going to set the precedents for European politics for at least the next generation. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but one thing that I am fairly confident in saying I think will happen is that Ukraine will fight tooth and nail, but it will be a valiant defeat. Russia will take Ukraine, and then some sort of peace agreement will be hashed out because Ukraine... So
what do we do as the West then? Because everyone's outcrying, everyone's going on that we're not doing enough. What do we do then?
What we do as the West is we do exactly what we're doing. We push for sanctions, we deal with military situations as they come up, and we as the ordinary people go out on the streets and we show our support for Ukraine, essentially. That is what the West can do. That is what the West is doing. But
so then, in a scenario then, Stealth, that they have took Ukraine, so what happens? Do we go, I'm going to wave a flag and please give Ukraine back to the Ukrainian people? It's not going to happen, mate. So
in that case, you have to reevaluate what happens when we get to the end of this conflict. But right now, that's all we can do because, as we say, we can't put boots on the ground. I actually
agree with you, Stealth. I'm just as the host, I'm just asking different scenarios. Yeah. I actually totally agree with you.
If we put boots on the ground now, that's World War III.
It shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen.
Exactly. If Russia takes Ukraine and then we go, no, we're not having it, and we put boots on the ground in Ukraine, that's World War III. We cannot put boots on the ground in Ukraine. It's just not going to have a good outcome for anybody.
Okay, so
I say we need to
in the same breath, then, in the same breath, Stealth. So they take Ukraine, and we say, okay, we can't put boots on the ground. We can't do anything. Let them have Ukraine. Let's look back a long, long time ago. So just for argument's sake, let me clutch an era out of the 40s, 1940s. Okay. So what do we do then? They've took one country. Do we let them take another country and say that's okay and take another country? Because we're saying we should, NATO shouldn't be on their borders, and Cheeky had a really good comment there. Should we let NATO do like we were saying, subliminally, I can't say that word, embrace other countries just to get on the border of Russia, or should we just let Russia do what I think they're doing at the moment and then hope they won't go, for argument's sake, to Poland next and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah.
If... I'll address the one point first, which is what happens if Russia does this to other countries, and that is a significant worry right now because right next to Ukraine is Moldova, and Moldova currently has a breakaway
friend of ours. is there?
Yeah, Chris. Moldova currently has a breakaway state of Transnistria attached to it, which is Russian aligned, just as the Donbass and Luhansk regions are. So there's a lot of worry that Moldova is a potential second target. I don't know. I can't say. It's way too early in the day to
Possibly, though, it's there. It's there.
There's a possibility, absolutely, but we don't know. But this is the thing. If Putin was to take Ukraine, then he's essentially got what he's been asking for, which is a buffer state. But equally, he has accepted the fact that if he takes Ukraine, he is then going to be adjacent to NATO. NATO has done nothing. That's all Putin's own doing. So at that point in time, that's his move. It's the ball's in his court at that point, because NATO has not done anything at that point. They have not moved. They have not aggressed against him. It's Putin's choice. If he goes into Moldova, then we've got another Ukraine. If he goes into Poland, if he goes into any NATO member country, Article 5. Immediate World War III, Article 5.
How do you think he's seen this, though? Do you think he's winning? Do you think, whatever he's thinking he has to do or he wants to do you think he's winning? Do you think I can just take this shit? I don't give a shit what NATO says. I don't care what the West think of me. If I want to take this, I'm going to take this. And if they don't like it, come and fight me.
Do I think the Russian military is winning? Maybe. But do I think the Russian military will win the war? Yes. Do I think that Putin is winning? Not really. Because at the end of the day, we have absolutely hammered Russia with sanctions, and we've also seen the Russian people.
But have we though, Stealth? Have we?
Yes, we have. We kicked them out of SWIFT earlier yesterday.
I didn't even know that happened.
Yep.
Oh, did it happen?
Confirmed they have been kicked out.
Right. Okay. I'm sure I read something today. They're still trying to do it.
Nope, it's been done. It's been confirmed that they are going to be removed from SWIFT.
Okay.
We are hammering their economy, and it's only going to get worse for them the longer this goes on, which is why, as I say, the fact that Ukraine is resisting is essentially pushing. The longer Ukraine resists and the longer Ukraine can hold off the Russians, the worse things will get for Russia. Putin needs this war to be over as quickly as possible, and the best thing that Ukraine can do right now is to hold them off. Hold out as long as possible, because the longer they do that,
which they are, absolutely, the longer they do that, the longer those sanctions are going to be rolling for, and that is going to snowball. Essentially, it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the other thing is, the perceived might of the Russian army is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, because every day, every hour that the Ukrainians hold out against the Russians, it's proving to NATO that Russia is not as powerful as they thought they were. Because in NATO's mind, and in the minds of a lot of people in NATO countries, Russia was this massive juggernaut who would just. I don't think they've shown the big guns yet, though. No, I honestly don't think.
This is not.
And I think you said this before, Stealth, that you've not seen the Russia or the amount of people. You've just seen a token amount of force going to the Ukraine.
This is not Papa Bear. This is Son Bear, basically. But the thing is, you need to compare it. Russia had all of this equipment and is essentially a superpower, and tried to take on Ukraine, and they've shown that they have made significant strategic mistakes in doing this. That in and of itself is enough to get people thinking, and people who understand military theory will see that and certainly say, this has given us significant insight into the Russian army and how it works, and their preparedness, willingness to fight wars, ability to fight wars, etc., etc., etc. The glimpse that this has given us is incredibly useful to NATO military planners. I don't know exactly how.
I think in a sense this has been a really bad mistake by Russia, because they've what's that word? Chinks in their armor. They have gone into. They thought they would just walk over the Ukraine. It's not happened, and the West are going, rubbing their hands together, thinking, actually, you're not the big dog you thought you were.
Exactly. We have heard Russia's bark. Now we are seeing Russia's bite, essentially, and NATO is waking up.
But I don't think we've seen it all. I honestly don't.
No, absolutely not. But
they've got a lot more.
NATO is essentially seeing what the other side is like, and that is very important, because, as I say, if you spoke to most people about Russia at the turn of the 2000s or 2010 or whatever, most people would say, "Oh yeah, I'm terrified of Russia because they can sweep anybody aside in front of them." But if you spoke to them now, especially people sort of in the know with governments and NATO and that, Russia has shown that, well, Ukraine, I should say, Ukraine has shown that Russia isn't as invincible as it likes you to believe, because a comparatively tiny nation with a much smaller military, a much smaller economy,
holding them off.
hold them off for 4 days, 5
Yeah.
days.
That's
6
a lot.
days.
People
Who
wouldn't
knows?
think that's a lot. That's a lot. If you're going against a superpower, you've got a tiny little country that are holding a superpower off.
Because this is the thing. War is a completely different state of being.
It's like a game of chess.
People think that, oh yeah, it's just a weekend. You know, you think about your usual weekend. You sleep in, you go to town, you might have a pizza on the Friday night, whatever, and it's all gone in 2 minutes. You're back at work on Monday. But in terms of war, 4 days is a long time.
It's a long time,
especially when you consider that the forces on Ukraine's border, the way they've invaded and the strength in which they have invaded. Yeah, honestly, when I saw the news that Ukraine had been invaded on Thursday, I was thinking this is going to be over by Saturday morning. They are going to sweep in, and Ukraine is not going to be able to mount a capable defense, basically, come the weekend. It's the end of the weekend, and Kiev is still in Ukrainian hands. It's surrounded, but it's still in Ukrainian hands.
Correct. And I think the race of people that the Ukrainians are, I think they will go to the last man. Even the ex-Miss Ukrainian, the Ukrainian ex-Miss World, whatever it is, from 2015, bitch had a fucking Kalashnikov saying, "You come to my country and I'm gonna kill you." This cheeky. Just want to say a cheeky. You can always get Polish vodka. You can get Swedish vodka. Don't worry about the vodka, mate.
Oh yeah, vodka's fine. But this is the very, very sad human element of it, which is I was looking through. I'm keeping up to date with the war, so I'm looking through various sources basically. But I've seen photos of, chat. Think of your grandmother. Think of the lovely woman who stays at home. Perhaps she's still got her husband with her. She's the woman that you've always been given to when you were a child, when you were, your parents weren't able to look after you. You went round to Nana's, and it was good. It was happy times. I'm now seeing those old women with Kalashnikovs, not because they want to have Kalashnikovs, but because they have decided I need to fight for my home. And I'm reading story. I saw one that really did touch me. There was a family who was taking cover essentially, and the son had basically put up a story saying, "My grandmother just told me that, when they were like 5 or something, they were hiding in Ukraine from Nazi soldiers. Now they're 80 odd, 90 odd, whatever, and they're hiding.
And they're doing the same.
From Russian soldiers."
Yes, correct.
And this
who at that time were with Russian, the Russian soldiers against the Nazis.
Yeah, but this is the horrible reality of war, which is old people.
It's sad. It's really sad. I think
war doesn't discriminate. It will kill you.
Correct. I think in 2022, it's a really sad situation, Stealth. I think we shouldn't be here. The situation that's happening now shouldn't be happening. I don't know how it's happening, but let's finish off by trying to explore how do we end this? Do we leave them to deal with it, or do we have to impose more sanctions? Do we have to get them to talk away from the likes of Belarus? I honestly don't know how they can sort this situation out, because Putin wants to take the Ukraine, and I think he wants to take it all, and the Ukraine are just not having it. We've seen the chinks in the armour, and I've got to hold my hands up to the Ukraine. Well done. Keep in there, by the way. And like I said before, I actually admired Putin a few years ago. I thought, strong man. I like his morals, but I've seen another side to that man in the last 4 days or so. So how does this get resolved?
I can see three ways that this could end. One, which is the most likely, is that the peace talks will fall through. Russia sweeps in, eventually takes over Ukraine, because let's face it, Ukraine is pouring everything they have into it, but Russia has reserves. Russia can always send more military equipment and will overcome Ukraine. That is a given if the war continues. Second option is the peace talks succeed, and there is some form of agreement which either disarms or demilitarizes Ukraine or even partitions Ukraine. Both of those are fairly sad because it essentially means that Ukraine is being stripped of its self-determination and other such stuff, which I disagree with. I believe that people should have the rights to self-determination, should have the rights to self-defense, whereas external forces, should we say, are now saying you do not have the right to have a military, you do not have the right to have military self-determination.
You do not have the right to own a gun.
But the third option, which is the most unlikely, but speaking real, third option is not going to happen. I don't know.
Go on.
I do not see this happening. Third option, Ukraine repels Russia. If Ukraine repels Russia, my God.
I'm not overly sure that won't happen.
I can't see it happening, personally. I just don't think that Ukraine, as valiant a defense they're putting up, I don't think Ukraine has the endurance or the manpower to do it, because we can give Ukraine as many weapons that exist in the world, but the manpower drain, fighting the war is incredibly
that's
expensive.
something I missed, Stealth. I apologize for butting in. That's something I missed. Now, Germany always said they would never send weapons because of previous altercations they had in world wars. And they said they would never, they would never send weapons. They would never supply another country with weapons or arms or whatever. And they've actually said, I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday. It was today. That they were going to send X amount of weapons over to the Ukraine.
Not only have they done that, but
and they've cancelled that. They've cancelled the line, the pipeline for the gas as well.
Yeah, Nord Stream 2. Yeah. For decades, NATO has tried to get Germany to meet its obligation of spending 2% of its GDP on defense for NATO. Basically, decades that's been going on. In 4 days, Putin has got them to agree to lift an arms embargo and spend 2%. That is how concerned Germany is about this. But
Alpha, sorry, Stealth. We're actually going to finish Alpha soon, so it's pointless adding you to the chat, mate, but maybe it's next time when you get on. And don't forget, if anyone's watching this on the Restless Natives channel, please go over to Discuss with Devlin. And I'd like to give you the opportunity now, and maybe in the comments to maybe give us some topics that we can talk about. I don't mind how they go, what they're about, controversial, not controversial. It could be anything going on in the world. It could be, YouTube drama, whatever. I'm willing to talk about it. I think this is where Discuss with Devlin is going to stand. But Alpha, I would have really liked to have had you on tonight, but it's just been me and Stealth tonight, and we're going to finish off in about 10 minutes or so. Cheeky said,
I want to address that point, actually. Just for clarity for anyone who was listening to this, Cheeky's just come in and said, realistically, what if all of this is to get the economy up by raising everything, saying there is a war? That's not how the economy works. The war will push prices up, and when prices go up, people spend less and the economy shrinks. You want the opposite of this. That's why it's so bad. That's why it's going to affect everybody, including See, this is the thing. People just think, oh, we're going to sanction Russia and it's going to affect Russia. No, no, we're going to sanction Russia. Russia has already imposed restrictions upon European countries. This is going to be bad for both of our economies, Europe and Russia.
Yeah, we're going to be in trouble as well. Absolutely. And America.
Everybody, basically.
We're all going to be in trouble because of this. Everything, not everything, but, you know, you're going to see a real change in the economy.
Yeah, yeah. And that's on top of COVID.
Yeah, we just got because COVID disappeared now. I think it's actually disappeared. We get a conflict, or is it a conflict? Is it a war? Is it just an invasion? I don't know, Stealth. But I think COVID's disappeared.
Oh yeah, like I don't think people are going to be reporting on COVID for a long time now. I mean, as long as this is going, it's going to get headline news, and COVID's going to be relegated to second fiddle.
Are you fully jagged? Or are you one of these not people that don't get
No, I've been jabbed.
Yeah, same. And I just want to say, I mean, it's totally irrelevant to the topic tonight, but do you know, people, if you want to get jabbed, you get jabbed. You want the vaccine, get it. If you don't, you don't. Don't fucking fight about it because you look like children. Do you know what I mean? Hello, Felix. That's my stepson, actually.
Hey.
But we're just going to finish off. Where are you, by the way? I've not seen you or heard you come in tonight. Have I got the house totally to myself tonight? Jack's away with the girls' weekend. She's back tomorrow. And that's why I could actually talk about serious conversations like this. So we really, at the end of the day, we feel for the Ukraine, but, you know, as normal people who have discussed this situation, we really, at the moment, still don't know what we think the outcome is going to be.
The point of, from what I've gleaned, the point of discussing Devlin is not to say we want this or we want the other. The point is to objectively discuss stuff, and that's exactly what we've done. All we've done is present the facts as we understand them to be true, and we've made predictions based upon them. And honestly, I don't think this is something we can predict the outcome to. I can just propose potential outcomes. Which of those happens? No idea.
What would your perfect just to finish off, and I'll give mine as well. What would your perfect outcome be?
My perfect outcome would be, well, I can't say my perfect outcome without getting into my personal beliefs and such, but
okay.
I think the perfect outcome is for the war to end as soon as possible. Minimize the loss of human life. Because at the end of the day, yes, we can personally, politically side with the Ukrainians, and I'm sure people will be personally siding with the Russians, but at the end of the day, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if you're Ukrainian. I don't give a shit if you're Russian. All I give a shit about is the fact that people are dying, and I don't like that. I do not like that at all, and I want that to stop. I don't care if it's Ukrainians dying, Russians dying, black, white, whatever you are. I just don't want people to die.
Correct. I totally agree. You know, regardless what race, you know, what colour you are, what, you know, country you come from, we don't want this shit. Even people who lean to the right, like myself, you don't want this shit. You no one wants a war. You can have your own personal opinions. My personal feelings about this is that, you know, leave these people alone. NATO, fuck off. Don't annex them into NATO. Russia is Russia. I'm probably the same. I don't even know what I'm actually saying at the moment because I just want this shit to stop because it could get very serious in a very quick time. And I didn't realise my stepson's actually upstairs. Didn't see him come in because I brought all my gear downstairs. But I just want all this to stop. I'm quite opinionated when I want to be, but you know, I don't think anyone wants this. And I'm not going to blame Putin. I'm not going to blame NATO. I'm not going to blame the West, the East. I just think all this should stop, really.
Agreed. I mean, there's nothing more that can be said. This needs to end, and the quicker it ends, the better, because hopefully that means fewer people die.
Correct. And on that point, I think we're going to end the stream tonight. I've really enjoyed it. The first event on Discuss with Devlin. If you've got anything that you would like us to discuss, and hopefully we'll get Stealth on again. We'll get him on camera one day. And I've actually seen Stealth, by the way, and we'll get him on camera and we'll see if we can make it into a proper podcast. And if anyone's, like I say, got any suggestions, what you want us to discuss, put it down in the comments below, or send me a private message, and I'll try to do what we can. I really appreciate everyone coming along. I want to say thank you for Stealth for coming along. I'm going to have a chat with Stealth just after the stream finishes. And Stealth, say good night, mate.
Good night, everyone. It was good to see people again. It was good to be on the panel again. I just wish it could be under better circumstances on a much happier topic. But to round that off, all I'm going to say is, after you guys finish watching this stream, go to your families, realize how much they mean to you, and just be happy. Just live your lives. Just be thankful for it. And if you get a moment, take a moment to remember the unfortunate people who didn't survive the past 4 days. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Stealth. Really appreciate you. Steg, everyone who's joined us tonight, really appreciate you coming along. We're going to end the stream now, and I really appreciate this. This has been really good. I think we could go far with this. I want to thank Stealth for coming along, helping me out tonight. It's been really good. Catch you on the next one. Laters.